All right, guys. So, as you know, Elizabeth Warren yesterday essentially made an announcement of sorts that she's running for the presidency in 2020. So, I decided it might be interesting to take a look at how she would do in a potential 2020 matchup against Donald Trump if she ended up winning the nomination. So, first of all, let's go through all the states Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump would get off the bat. Washington and Oregon go to her off the bat. Oh, Idaho and Utah go to Trump off the bat. So does Wyoming. So does Nebraska. So does. There we go. Actually, no, Texas would be a toss up. California goes safely to the Democrats to Elizabeth Warren. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Illinois. Oh, nope. There we go. All right. Um, oh, and then this would be safe red. All right, and then this would be safe blue. All right, so now let's talk about. Oh, and I forgot. And then this shouldn't be safe blue. And then here we go. All right, so now we're going to look at all the other states and how they would go. So, first of all, I do think Donald Trump would hold on to Texas. Again, Elizabeth Warren is not the type of candidate who can energize her base, so she's going to have a hard time flipping red states. And you know what? Because of that, I think she's also going to lose Georgia, especially since Republicans did all right there in 2016. I think Nebraska's second district will stay in Republican hands. Um, I think Arizona, this might be a bold prediction, but I think Arizona will stay. I also think North Carolina will stay. Stay. I think North Carolina will stay in Republican hands. I think Virginia will stay in Democratic hands. As you know, that's becoming a more safely Democratic state. Going over to Colorado, again, this is another state which I think is becoming more safely Democratic. I'm going to give Colorado to Elizabeth Warren. I'm also going to give Nevada to Elizabeth Warren. So where does that leave us? 206, 216. Ohio, if the midterms taught us anything, it's that Ohio is going in a more safely Republican direction. Republicans are really locking that state down. Iowa Republicans had mixed results there this year, but there are a lot of rural areas there. It's still a very conservative state, so I'm going to say that Trump holds on to Iowa. As for Minnesota and New Hampshire, this is Trump's second election, so I think it's going to be hard for him to flip uh, states like because this is his second time running. I think it's going to be harder for him. Oh, because this is his second time running, I think it's going to be harder for him to win places like New Hampshire and Minnesota because he's not a new candidate. And if you look at Obama's margin of victory in 2012 was actually a lot smaller than it was in 2008. Going down to Florida, I believe that Florida will go to Donald Trump. Well, and I believe it will go to Donald Trump because um, I believe it will go to Donald Trump because of the fact that Florida just went in a very Republican direction in the midterms. And I think he's locking. I think Republicans are really starting to lock that state down because, again, if you go upstate in Florida, or mainly southern Florida, especially near the border, especially when you get to the Florida Keys, when you get around, that's around the border in Alabama. There's a lot of rural areas, and again, it's bordering Alabama, so there's a lot more conservative voters there. So for that reason, I'm going to give Florida to Donald Trump. Maine second, again, this is Donald Trump's second election, which makes it harder for him to flip states. So I'm going to assign that to Elizabeth Warren. So now it all comes down to three different states. If Elizabeth Warren wins two of these, she wins the presidency. If Donald Trump wins two of these, he wins the presidency. And of course, these states were traditionally blue states before Donald Trump flipped them in 2016. Now, in the midterms, the Republicans didn't do very well here. But I'm actually going to give Wisconsin to Donald Trump, which puts him one electoral vote away from the presidency, or one electoral vote away from winning re-election. Again, I know that Republicans pretty much got slaughtered here in the 2018 races, but it is still a conservative state. It still is becoming a little bit more conservative. I think the last couple of years it's been trending in a more conservative-ish direction. And I'm going to show you something. Ohio Senate. Hold on. Look at the 2010 midterms. Look at this. Look at this margin. This isn't even close. This isn't even a close margin. See, this is the Senate race in 2010. Again, Obama won the state in 2008. And just 2 years later, look at that. Republican wins the Senate race by a huge, huge margin. But what about the governor's race? Again, this guy was the incumbent. He should have won. He was well known. He was the incumbent. And yet, he was unseated. He was unseated by the Republican John Kasich. And just 4 years earlier, he won by a landslide. But then just 4 years later, he gets clobbered. And yet, 2 years later, Barack Obama wins this state. So Republicans do really well in this state in 2010 in the midterms, and yet 2 years later, get clobbered, or the Democrats win. What about Florida, though? Let's look at the Florida governor race from 2010. Oh, wow, look, the Republican won that. Gee, this is a state Barack Obama carried in 2008. Hold on a second. What about the Senate race in Florida in 2010? Well, would you look at that? Not even close. To be fair, the governor at the time, the incumbent governor who was running as an independent, and the Democratic Congressman Kendrick Meek did split the vote. But would you look at that? Would you look at that? And yet 2 years later, hold on. Hold on. 2 years later, look at that. Barack Obama wins the state. So Democrats get clobbered there. But what about the governor race? Oh, gee, look at that. The Republican won there. Republican won the governor's race by a sizable margin. Huh. What about the Senate race? Oh, gee, look at that. The Republican won the Senate race. What do you know? But hold on. How did the Republicans do in the presidential race 2 years later? Oh, gee, they got clobbered. Huh. And then I just want to do one more. Look at this. This is the governor's race in Iowa in 2010. Terry Branstad, the Republican, defeated the incumbent governor by 9 points. 9 points, not even really that close. But what about the Senate race? Surely Democrats must have done well. Oh, gee, look at that. It's a blowout. It's a blowout on the Senate side. Look, these are the results on the Senate side. The Democrat won one. Well, the Democrat only got one little tiny county. That's how well the Democrats did. So surely Republicans must have done extremely well in the presidential race in Iowa 2 years later, right? Let's see how they did. Oh, no, they didn't. Gee, so maybe how they do in the midterms isn't always a great indication. Sometimes it is, but maybe not always. So I'm going to give Wisconsin. I'm going to assign Wisconsin to Donald Trump in this scenario. But what about Michigan? I'm actually not as confident that Donald Trump could win Michigan because he only won it by 11,000 votes. Again, Trump doesn't really have that much of a ground game in Michigan, if you really think about it, because Michigan in 2018 they lost their governor. The governor of Michigan lost, or they ended up getting a Democratic governor, which means in 2016 when Trump was running, they had a Republican governor. They don't have a Republican governor now. They have a Democratic governor now, which means Trump doesn't have as good a ground game. Not a great sign for him. So now it comes down to Maine's 1st District and Pennsylvania. Again, if Elizabeth Warren wins this, it's 268 to 269. And if, let's say, for example, Elizabeth Warren wins all of Maine's 4 electoral votes, then it would go to Congress. And considering Democrats are in control of the House, most likely what would happen is they would elect Elizabeth Warren president, and since Republicans have the Senate, they would likely elect Mike Pence to be the vice president. But let's just say for a second that doesn't happen. What happens? I'm predicting Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania. I'm going to say it right now. I do think Donald Trump will win Pennsylvania. There are many conservative states. Again, you go downstate, there's a lot of Reagan-ish areas. And yes, Donald Trump doesn't do very well in the suburbs, but there are a lot of rural areas in Pennsylvania, and I think that's going to help him against Elizabeth Warren. And then finally, no. There we go. I'm going to predict Maine's 1st district goes to Donald Trump. So this is my final prediction, 290 to 248. Overall, I don't think Elizabeth Warren is the best candidate for the Democrats. She's just not likable. She's not charismatic enough to go up against Donald Trump. And again, I don't think she's going to win over progressives in the way people think she's going to. But yeah, this is my final prediction, 290 to 248. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.